Now, I'm very excited to introduce you to our speaker. Cristian Arango serves as Finance, Operations, and Strategy Subscriptions Management Consultant for Procore Technologies. Now, Mr. Orango is a JD graduate from the University of Miami School of Law, as well as he also received his BA from the University of Florida. Now, Mr. Orango holds certificates in finance and quantitative modeling from Wharton and behavioral finance from Duke University. He continues to pursue his passion and advocacy for affordable housing and community development, LGBTQ rights, and further, he remains active in the Hispanic National Bar Association as vice chair of publications for its LGBT division. Mr. Orango is also a member of the board of directors for the Pacific Pride Foundation. So thank you so much for joining us today. I am incredibly excited to get to talk to you. Is there anything else that our audience should know about you before we jump into questions?
Thank you, Megan. I really appreciate you having me here today. It's really an honor to be talking about all these very interesting subject matters. A bit more about myself. I am a dad. I adopted my son, Zane. He is 5 years old. And it's just beautiful to see how much he's grown up all these years. Crazy, a bit of a summary. Zane was born when I was a 2L in law school. And it's been an incredible journey. Also giving him a second chance. And in addition to that, I live here in Santa Barbara with my partner. And as you mentioned, I'm extremely passionate about affordable housing and LGBTQ advocacy. So that's a bit more about me.
Thank you for sharing that, and congratulations on fatherhood. We just passed Father's Day this past weekend, so hopefully you were able to celebrate with Zane.
Thank you.
All right, so I wanted to talk about creating safe corporate spaces for LGBTQ employees. Now, as a member of the community yourself, could you share with us some of your own experiences? I'm really interested to hear, examples of when companies got it right, and maybe some examples of when they might have missed the mark a bit.
Yeah, definitely. So experiences within my place of work here at Procore, being able to observe internally, but also externally, and contrasting them back and forth. I think just high level, and obviously some of the top ones that I've seen and experienced deal around providing LGBT training, not only for leadership, but management and employees. It's an essential piece of a resource that every employee should have access to, especially when they're managing folks. And I'll dive a bit more as to why that's super important. Being an openly gay man, I keep learning. It doesn't stop there. There's so many different sub-communities within the rainbow that we associate with. And it's a continuous process that requires and needs consciousness. Another additional piece to this involves appointing LGBTQ plus allies. That's extremely important because not everyone within leadership or HR or amongst the ERGs is going to be a member of the community. But definitely it's important to understand that there are folks within the company that understand and want to learn more about the community and its sub-communities. And that provides a healthier space that's safe, more comfortable, and there's relation. In addition to that, creating gender neutral bathrooms is extremely important. Everyone comes from a different background. They see themselves differently from each other, from all the different shapes and thresholds that we've been taught over decades. We all have now the ability to identify ourselves and grow in that space as well. So walking on campus and having the ability to use a bathroom and see gender neutral is such a comforting and proof and evidence that there's been work and it's intentional as well from the company to its employees. And the last one, of course, is creating the affinity/ERG groups, employee resource groups. I think that's pivotal. It's pivotal for a variety of reasons. From within those groups, your leadership or management can tap into very important talk tracks or highlighted data that otherwise would not exist without that particular group in place. For example, how many individuals from the LGBTQ community have reached leadership positions, management positions? And so it's pretty hard just to create that awareness and consciousness by going to Google and researching and understanding the statistics and the data, because you're dealing with folks from within. So having ERG and affinity groups is essential. And those are some of the most important key ones that I've observed and experienced. I want to dive a bit more into the importance of ERG. Before joining Procore, I was a member of different firms, etc. And I never had a space where I could come out freely and express a bit more about my life, the fact that I am an openly gay father. And so Procore's ability to provide not only an ERG, but a summit amongst other ERGs and the abilities to be part of a panel to talk about these experiences and what is to be out and proud. It's just so incredible, and also sparks additional interest in being a better employee, because you understand that your job place where you spend most of the day cares about you.
I think you've hit on some fabulous points there, and I want to make sure that we hold space for them. I know that I can think of a couple times in my past where it hasn't applied to me, but I have seen situations where clearly somebody didn't think this through, right? Clearly somebody was like, maybe they had great intentions and that's awesome, but that's the first step. It's not the only step. So when you think back to sometimes when companies miss the mark, do you think that those misses are like kind of a small detail that makes all the difference? Or do you think it might be an issue from like the planning stage as opposed to execution of something that they think is going to be more welcoming or more inclusive for a specific demographic?
Definitely. It definitely comes down to the planning stage. And here's the tricky part about bringing additional change and awareness into a business. These changes have to evolve. They have to continuously grow and change. Otherwise, it will stall. And I see a lot of that happening. And that's a slippery slope situation for the business or the leadership in place, because you don't want employees to feel like they don't have representation or a voice. So the planning stage is essential because you have to figure out which questions to ask. And some of those questions are very uncomfortable, but that's the key. We're holding these folks to different standards in their particular roles to make sure that they create a more inclusive and equitable workplace. And it all comes down to asking a difficult question and not just, getting comfort about the trends or falling into those trends or checking boxes. So just to give you a couple more examples, some of the marks, which I consider them more as opportunities for growth. I would say holding summits. If your industry, for example, Procore is in the construction management software field, figure out which places you can address within your own industry, the construction industry, inequality or issues in terms of inclusion or diversity by bringing other firms from outside to within to address these very uncomfortable questions. And that's how you become a leader in your industry, right? The lack of women in industry, or the fact that there are not that many women of the LGBTQ community in C-suite positions or leadership. These are the kind of opportunities that these companies can look into if they really want to generate intentional change. And the other opportunity that I see, or Ms. Mark, is making sure that the company or the business is helping local pro-LGBTQ suppliers, vendors, that feeds into the employee-based population. It's not only just a matter of writing a check to a nonprofit. Is to have a continuous relationship and partnership with local businesses, local nonprofits that has to be ongoing.
I think that's a wonderful thing to highlight, because you're right. Things like the diversity of your vendors may or may not be the first thing that you think of when you are at an org trying to make the org not just more welcoming, but more inclusive, more impactful for your employees. So I love that you highlighted, that idea of not just looking at your own org, but look at the other orgs that you do business with. Look where you get your supplies. Look where, what does your marketing look like? Is it inclusive? That kind of stuff. I love that. So when people are trying to create these safe spaces, especially for the LGBTQ community, I know that we on past talks we've discussed this idea of visibility, right? And how you want to show support, you want it to be to be front and center, but then it also leads very quickly into things like rainbow washing, where you have a company that their hearts may be truly in the right place, but they're either kind of jumping out of their lane or not really putting their money where their mouth is. Is this something that you've seen continue, like this trend has been something that you've seen over the years? Or do you think that maybe that's starting to go by the wayside as people understand that you can't just slap a rainbow on your logo and call it good?
I think with everything that happened with COVID-19 and the pandemic and the ability for employees to start questioning certain frameworks in place, it's definitely sparked this hunger and thirst to hold companies accountable. We are all smart people. I mean, we have access to information. We can Google it. We can thrive on learning, right? And we understand what the angle can be from certain companies in using the rainbow flag as this marketing tool. And the importance on that is make sure that we question it. If you work for an employer or a company that is currently doing this, hold them accountable. In today's world, where there's so much visibility and thirst for transparency, it's important to use the tools that are in place within your business or raise awareness about the kind of tools that the business can adopt to hold leadership accountable and make them understand, listen, we are smart people. We understand what you're doing. You have to be intentional, and you're definitely not going to just jump on this gravy train and make money off of a cause that has layers and layers of trauma and history, in the years prior.
Yes. Oh, I think that's a very good point, right? You're not just trying to cater to a demographic. You do need to understand the party or the community that you're trying to reach. That kind of helps you avoid missteps or unfortunate results, or I should say, well-intentioned efforts that might really strike the wrong tone without people really realizing it.
Yeah.
We did get a question from the chat that I want to address. This person had said, how do you think safe spaces evolved in the hybrid working model? Because I think this is a really interesting thing, because when we're talking about safe spaces, so often it's a physical location, right? Where we want the office to be safe. We want the department to be a safe or welcoming place for people. What do you think happened, and how do you think the idea of safe spaces evolved in a hybrid world where a lot of us were working from home?
Yeah, definitely. And we've experienced this within my own company. We have the ERG called Prism. And Prism not only feeds up HQ1 or our number one headquarter office, but it provides via a software platform like Zoom, for example, or Slack, the ability to be as inclusive as possible, not only within the US offices, but also internationally. We have offices in France, in Germany, in the UK, New Zealand, Australia. So it's important that when you're creating safe places, one of the questions you have to ask yourselves, especially in today's hybrid model, is should we or we not provide a reliable software platform where we can provide full inclusivity to all of our employees? That is essential. The worst thing you want is to leave out employees that have onboarded during the pandemic without a voice or an ability to feel some type of connection, right? And some of the companies have adopted these once in a month on-site or once in a quarter on-site visits, which I think is an incredible opportunity for ERGs to be strategic and use the logistics available to group as many members of these virtual ERG groups as possible, but on campus in physical form while they're attending their on-site as well. So there's a lot of moving pieces. But the number one theme across this particular question and theme is the fact that there has to be full inclusion, and that is only achievable through the correct platform that's adopted by the company. And employees must hold their companies accountable by making sure that that's implemented.
Yeah, of course. So let's talk a little bit about the impact, right? When orgs are trying to create these safe spaces, what kind of impact does that have on the org, especially considering that not everybody in the org likely is part of, you know, the rainbow umbrella? So what does that safe space, like, what are the impacts of that on the org at large?
Yeah, definitely. I think when company or organization is thinking about building a safe place, one of the things that I like to rely on when I'm explaining this particular subject is creating dignity frameworks. And dignity frameworks is essentially the pillar where it makes it necessary to bring in all the positive that can affirm human value. And by doing so, you're opening the door for affiliates and members of the LGBTQ community to mingle with each other, to act as a union, instead of excluding, or traditionally how groups would address unethical behaviors. This is a space that is all positive. And by doing so, you are providing flexibility to individuals like leadership or executives that could attend these spaces, because you're providing that positive mindset, environment, ambience that's only focused on human value.
Oof, that's a powerful statement right there, right? You are trying to focus on the value of the humans, not what is basically be able to be gained from them for the org. I think that's so wonderful. Now, if you are a leader and you're working on creating these safe spaces at work, do you think it's reasonable to expect all LGBTQ plus employees to be out at work? Is that, do you think that's a reasonable expectation for people to have?
It's not a reasonable expectation. We'll have to be very conscious, both sides, that this is going to be a process of cultivating trust. And in order to cultivate trust, leadership, so if I'm in the shoes of leadership, I have to communicate to my employees that I want to be held accountable, that you are able to call me out. Because without that initiative, it's really hard to cultivate that trust. So one is tied to the other. But for accountability to be there, to be present, palpable, right? There has to be a culture of feedback. You have to have surveys that come straight from the employee-based population that basically shine light on all these different disparities and challenges and problems. So it's definitely a process to build it. The expectation cannot be in the absolute from both sides, but I think it does come down to the leadership, the CEO, the COO, the CFO, to be intentional, to be able to build that trust. It has to be there. It must be there. Otherwise, it's very challenging. And it goes back to the fact you don't want a population of employees feeling like they have no real voice.
No, I think that's a really good thing to point out. It's one thing to create a space, but if it doesn't feel safe to the people that are meant to benefit from it, what's the point? You might as well have just said, like, here's your empty conference room. It's not. Yeah, exactly. You're checking a box. You're not. Yeah, you're checking a box. You're not making this about the results. You're making it about, okay, good, we did that. Now we can move on. Now, obviously, rainbow capitalism is huge, and thankfully, as companies get more and more transparent and consumers get more and more emboldened and more empowered, there's a lot more pushback, right, on companies that are just kind of trying to cash in on maybe their proximity to the LGBTQ community, or the usefulness of their product, as opposed to the things that are really needed for that group, especially within their own org. Can you kind of help us understand what is the real difference between that kind of, rainbow capitalism, and then creating these genuine safe spaces? Are there, points that can really kind of stand out as like, oh, this is on the right path, or like, maybe not?
I think it's a very, very, it's definitely a hot topic, and it comes down whether we're dealing with a transparency cover up here, or we're dealing with an intentional good faith proposition to make sure the employee experience is as inclusive and genuine and healthy as possible. If we're talking about rainbow capitalism, we have to be very careful that companies will definitely want to profit off the commercialization of pride movements, most notably Pride Month, right? Month of June. That's why when you walk around the stores, you see all these gray lines with the rainbow colors attached to fitness clothing, etc. And you have to begin questioning that and understand, okay, what is the history of these folks in terms of being a company? And if they're all about supporting our community and being involved in Pride Month and being there for us, etc., well, what other nonprofits or organizations are they supporting, right? That really will tell you exactly how genuine these movements within the Pride Month are. If they're supporting organizations that are, let's just call it out, anti-LGBTQ, then that's even more heavy evidence that they really don't care as much, and they're really trying to make profit here and widen their margins. And that is truly the opposite of a safe place. When you are building a safe place, you have to be conscious that what you're trying to provide to your employees is a space where they can freely express themselves, employees, where they don't have fear of intimidation, of being open, of being proud. And from my experience, I can go into a meeting and talk finance and strategy and meet with CFOs and tell them, hey, we need to work on this. This is why you chose our software, etc. And I can meet with my division again and be Chris, but the professional version of Chris, and be very good in my role. But I know that once I go into Prism, my little ERG, I can be myself. I can tell folks, oh my gosh, Zane loved surfing, and he's super happy, and also address concerns. For example, well, I share custody with his other dad, and I'm super concerned about the fact that if it weren't for the fact that we have the resources to send him to a private Hebrew school, then Zay would not be able to feel proud that he has two dads living in the state of Florida. So the ability to have an ERG, a safe place, and communicate with that, I'm seeking support. It's a space where people will have your back and give you love and also mean it, express it, like feel it.
Yes, I mean, I think it's one of those things that people who have not felt like they were ostracized, or like they were, not part of the dominant social group in their area, they might not really have an understanding of just how much energy it takes to not bring your whole self to work, right? Because when we think about it, especially in terms of like homosexuality versus heterosexuality, or basically anything that's outside of like kind of the straight box that most of society was built around, you really don't think about all the times that you like mention, like, oh yeah, I've got a date tomorrow night, or my wife and kids are going out to do blah 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 with me, or we're going on a family vacation. And these are all situations where it's not just the one sentence, right? It's not just the one conversation. There's so much more involved in this. And if what you're trying to do is actively not share what you've got going on and kind of not let it slip, there's a lot involved in that. There's tons, and the amount of energy that it takes on top of your normal workday is just bonkers.
Yeah.
So I think, yeah. Oh, go ahead, please.
Yeah, definitely. I do want to say that if a company and its leadership, it's really all about creating safe places. One innovative idea that they should consider is creating brave places. Bravery, and by that I mean creating a space that allows managers or supervisors to come clean forward comfortably, being a bit vulnerable, and tell an employee that is part of the LGBTQ community, hey, I can relate with you, but I want to learn from you. So educate me. Be that source of your authentic self and teach me how I can be a better manager to you. So we have the ERGs, which are super important, but I think one way to avoid them from stalling is creating these more aggressive policies by providing those that are not part of the community an opportunity to learn as well.
Oh, I like that. And you're right. We talk about where the labor falls on this and the amount of work that's done, by groups who need that support and may or may not be able to, emotionally handle the fact that, you are basically being asked like, okay, well, what do I need to know here? You are kind of made to be that resource. I've experienced it in very small ways with my bipolar diagnosis and talking to people about that. And I can only imagine how much more impactful these conversations are when you are opening up something that is, a real window into this employee's life. And you're right, having those protocols or making more active strides, especially in those smaller levels, on the team level and the department level, really does help kind of bring this thing full circle, right? Because you aren't just creating those spaces for these affinity groups, you're also trying to make sure that they feel welcomed and heard within the larger conversation.
Absolutely.
I love that. All right, we have almost reached our time limit today, but I want to give you a chance. Is there anything else that you wanted to say to our group today that we have not covered? Something that they have to know before they leave today?
Definitely. We are very fortunate to be in a country where we can be loud and proud. And if we are part of an organization or a company where they're obviously very involved CEOs, executive directors, whatever the label may be, right? We must make sure that we hold these folks to a higher standard. They're there for a reason. They're not just there to rip the benefits of holding the title, right? I mean, we all want to be CEOs, right? But the real work comes down to being intentional. Do not let your company stall. It's very easy to just say, you know what, I'm just going to go with the status quo. So that's the one thing I would recommend to everyone. My company, we just hit IPO last year, and the company itself, its leadership group, called out its own deficiencies, right? We need more people of color in management positions. We need more women in C-suite level positions. But it's up to us, the employees, to make sure they keep doing that as time goes and progresses. So that's the one thing I would want to emphasize today.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yes. Like keep your workplaces accountable. And even if all that means is like kind of following up, like, hey, we did this program last year. Now I'm not really seeing that on the schedule anymore. Is there a reason for that? Asking these questions should not be a problem if your org is really committed to trying to, move the needle on this. Cristian, I just want to say huge thank you. It has been wonderful to spend the last 30 minutes with you. Thank you again. Like this has been so wonderful. I can't wait to speak to you again.
Yes, likewise. Thank you so much for the opportunity. And I love your energy. Just love it.
Thank you. Thank you so much.